Hello, my name is Linda Abraham. I'm going to be presenting Get Accepted to Harvard Business School in just a couple of minutes. Just a little bit about me before we start. I am the president and founder of Accepted. I also am a co-founder of the Association of International Graduate Admissions Consultants and was its first president. I've been interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, U.S. News, Business Week, Poets and Quants, and many other fine and probably not so fine publications. And I'm also the host of the Admissions Straight Talk podcast. So now that you know a little bit about me, let me learn a little bit about you. I'd like to start by knowing where you're located. City and state if you're in the United States, city and country if you're outside, and if you could use the question window for your responses. Again, the question window should be easily, Washington, D.C., welcome. Toronto, Canada, Boston, Washington, D.C. Actually, I'm going to be there very soon in Silver Spring, Chicago, L.A., a neighbor, New York. I was there a couple of weeks ago. Another neighbor in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Houston, LA. Got a lot of Angelinos here today. Boston, Houston, Texas, Arkansas, San Diego, New York City, Indonesia. It's early in the morning there. Chicago, Manila, Philippines, Washington, D.C., Sao Paulo, Buenos Aires, London, Kathmandu. Really? Georgetown, Santa Monica. We lived there for many years. Mexico City, Atlanta, Minneapolis, Edmonton. All right. Mostly New World, but some representatives of the Old World too. London. What time is it in London now? My goodness, it's the middle of the night. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. All right, the next thing I'd like to learn about you is kind of where you're at in the application process. So you're going to see a poll on your screen, and the questions are you planning, when are you planning to apply? Definitely applying round one, planning to apply this year during one of the later rounds, most likely applying in fall 17, well, it should be fall 18 or later, my apologies, in a later application cycle. Not sure if applying and when. So that should say planning to apply in fall 18 or later, not 17. But let's see. Okay, we're at 81%. Ooh, we do have a wide awake audience. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll and share the results with you all. So 49% of you are definitely applying round one. 26% are planning to apply this year, 23% later, 11% not sure. Well, you are a more committed group than I had this morning when we only had, or more committed to round one, I should say. We only had 29% applying round one this morning, and we had a less certain group, 18% simply weren't sure. Okay, let's go on to the next bit of information that I'd like to learn about you. So how many of you plan to apply to, or how committed you to applying to Harvard Business School? Definitely, probably, maybe, and doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise, are your options. Let's see. And then definitely, probably, maybe, or doubt it, but I'd love you to convince me otherwise, are the options. And we have 85% having voted. 5, 4, anybody else want to chime in? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And here we go. Let's share it. Whoops. There you go. Okay. So 69% are definitely applying. 20% probably. 6% maybe, and 6% I doubt it. So again, this is a more committed group than I had this morning. Okay. Interesting. And then a couple of housekeeping items before we really get into the meat of the webinar. There is a worksheet that's a handout on your dashboard. You can download it just by clicking on it. I suggest that you download it and print it out, and that will make taking notes a little bit easier if you're so inclined. Obviously, you don't have to, but that's what it's there for. All right. Also, at the end of the webinar, I'm going to give a couple of copies of MBA Admissions Smarties away. That's the book that I co-authored with accepted consultant Judy Gruen. So pay attention and have a chance to win. Also, at the end of the webinar, we have allowed time for Q&A, and I'm going to be announcing a special then also. How many of you would like to know the guaranteed route to HBS? If you'd like to know that, please raise your hand, which means clicking on the hand icon on your dashboard. So if you'd like to know that the guaranteed route, 100% guaranteed. It'll get you accepted at Harvard Business School. Raise your hand. Click on that hand icon. Well, okay, the hands are going up. Hands are going up. Yeah, we're all right. Fine. Most of you would like to know that. Most of you probably also realize it doesn't exist, or a lot of you realize it doesn't exist because you didn't raise your hand. It doesn't exist, I'm sorry to say, and I can't guarantee that the steps I'm going to outline today will guarantee acceptance, but they will definitely enhance your chances of acceptance. So the plan for this evening is to go through the 4-part framework for getting acceptance and apply it to Harvard Business School. And this framework applies to Harvard 2+2 also. It's not like they have a separate set of criteria. Work experience will be a little bit different for 2+2, but the basic criteria are the same. The basic framework is the same. And you can use this strategy framework on other top programs too, but the tactics and the focus today is going to be strictly on Harvard Business School's application. I'm also, in the course of the webinar, going to issue certain warnings and caveats. And I'm going to start with one now. You're not going to get into Harvard Business School by putting on makeup. It won't hide the wrinkles and the warts. Waving magic wands won't do. You need to submit a substantive application. And in my mind, that means competitive qualifications and an effective presentation of those qualifications. In other words, you need to demonstrate fit. Your overriding aim is to show that you belong at Harvard Business School. Now, let's dive into the meat of this webinar and the meat of what we're going to be discussing today. How do you show you belong? And I'd like you to tell me what you think in the question window. How do you intend to show you belong at Harvard Business School? Demonstrate leadership potential. Very good, Kevin. Demonstrate leadership over a long period. Good. Intellectual curiosity and professional potential. Good, Elizabeth. Demonstrate commitment to community. That's one aspect for sure. Via strong overall application. Well, that's a little general. I want to be a little more specific. Realistic idea of why you want an MBA from HBS. Have you been listening to me? Differentiated leadership experience. Good, Joseph. That's excellent. Describe activities that I will participate in on campus. That's part of it. Interested in HBS case method. That's part of it. Clarity of goals. Definitely part of it. Okay. You folks are doing great. And most of you are getting some element of what you need to do in your application. And on some level, my question is a little unfair because I'm going to spend the next 45 minutes telling you what I think goes into a good application. I'm asking you in a couple of seconds to essentially tweet to me what should go into it. But I wanted to get you thinking. And clearly, you have been thinking about it. That's very, very clear. So let's go through the 4 parts of the framework. And if there's anything you take away from this webinar today, I hope you take away the concept that you need all 4 parts of this framework. Okay? The first part is you need to demonstrate, in order to show that you belong at Harvard, you need to demonstrate that you can do the work and excel. That's absolutely critical. In Harvard words, and some of you quoted it, you need to show that you have analytical aptitude and appetite. That's what they are looking for. Now, the easiest way to do so is through your undergrad transcript and test score. But that's not the only way you can do so, and those elements alone will not really show the analytical aptitude and appetite, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now let's talk about, though, the undergrad transcript and test score. Ideally, you want to be at or above the averages for accepted students in both your grades and the test score. If not, how can you convince Harvard to accept you with below average grades? Now realize that the averages, this was for the class of 2018, the average entering GPA is 3.67. The preliminary figure for the class of 2019, which is, again, it's not finalized yet, is a 3.71, so it actually went up slightly. Realize that averages are what they are because approximately half the people, not exactly half, but approximately, were admitted with below average grades. And approximately half the students in the class were admitted with a below average GMAT. So don't look at the average and see it as a floor or a ceiling or some kind of, barrier either way. It's not. It's just a piece of information. And also recognize that the farther away you are below that average, and if both your grades and test scores are below average, the less likely it is that you can effectively demonstrate you'll be able to do the work required at Harvard Business School. So if your grades are a little below average, or perhaps you lack some quant coursework, take business-related classes and earn A's in them if you have a problematic GPA or lack quant classes. Consider certificates like the CFA if it's relevant to your career goals. If your quant skills are weak, if you're the proverbial poet, but your grades are good, consider something like mbamath.com or quant courses at your local college. In terms of which courses I would recommend, look at Statistics for Business, Calculus if you have the prerequisites and remember them, Economics, Accounting 1 are all good courses to consider. MOOCs are also an option, and HBX Core is also an excellent option. It's a new program from HBS. A high test score can mitigate low grades. For the top 10, including Harvard, ideally you want to be at 80th percentile in both quant and verbal, whether your grades are good or below average. The median GMAT for the class of entering in September is 730. The range, the mid 80% range, is 700 to 760. Again, those are the preliminary numbers, but I wouldn't expect an enormous amount of change in those numbers. If you're considerably below the 80th percent, and I don't mean 78 or 79, I mean considerably below, on either the verbal or quant, do consider a retake. You can retake it, they'll take your highest scores, and that's one of the beauties of the GMAT score, unlike the GPA, is that you can retake. If you're not sure whether to retake or not, we'll be sending out links to these two resources that discuss that question. One is a blog post, one is a webinar that I gave actually on this topic. So analytical aptitude and appetite is generally evident in your transcript and test scores, the objective elements of the application, but not exclusively present there. And again, we'll get to that in a minute. And somehow, some way, you need to show, if you want to be a successful applicant to Harvard, that you can handle the math required and the communications required of a Harvard Business School student. You have to show you can do the work effectively and thrive. So that's part one of the framework. Part two, have a clear, realistic idea why you want an MBA from HBS and how you intend to use it. Now, question for you, why do you think they care about what you're going to do after you get out? Why do they care about your immediate post-MBA goal? Why do they care about your longer-term aspirations? In the question window, please. They want successful people to be their graduates. Very good. It affects Harvard stats and rankings. That's true. So you can be a successful post-grad. It shows you can think logically and are driven. That's definitely part of it. They need alumni donors. Well, that's probably part of it, that they're doing pretty well with what they have. If we're successful, they're successful. That's definitely true. Affects their reputation. Yeah, to check whether the MBA would align with their goals. They want you to help you succeed. And here, and Krishna got it, if you don't have a plan, you'll most likely not succeed later. If you don't have a plan, there's no definition of success. If you don't have a plan, they can't see whether you're going to be likely to succeed. Now, at the morning session, Jennifer Bloom joined us in the Q&A, and she pointed out quite correctly that Harvard Business School is one of those schools that cares less, finds the goal less important than some other MBA programs like Chicago Booth or Stanford for that matter. But they still have it as part of their application. And they actually they ask you, I think more for statistical purposes, the industry and function. But when they ask you to tell us more about your career aspirations with 500 characters, I don't think that's not just for statistics. They want to see that you have direction in life, not, as D. Leopold used to say, a laminated life plan. 500 characters is approximately 100 words. How would you use that box? It's a very open-ended question. You could discuss greater career aspirations and goals, or why the goal you have motivates you, Did you decide you want to pursue this end? Think about what you really want Harvard to know about your career aspirations. And you could also, there was one woman in the participant in the morning who had kind of two goals, and it would be perfectly logical to go from one to the other. So that might be also part of this career aspirations. Obviously, you have to be succinct and to the point because you don't have a lot of room. In looking at your application as a whole, admissions should be able to connect the dots between what you've been doing and what you want to do via Harvard's program, its career strengths, and its extracurricular opportunities. For some of you, that will be really easy. If you're moving up in consulting, for example, you can write in terms of, for the aspiration question, write about the impact you intend to have as you move up, or some particular business issues, strategy issues that you intend to explore and have an impact on. If the connection between your past and desired future via the MBA isn't obvious, make it clearer. You don't need to abandon or hide a non-traditional career path or a change. Just make a logical case for it. For example, a bioengineer who worked for a biotech company in medical devices now wants an MBA so that he can move into general management or perhaps launch a startup. He's making a change from a technical role to a general management role, but it all makes sense. It's a logical kind of change, and he can make a good case for it. So the four-part framework again: number one, show you can do the work and excel. 2, have a goal that requires a Harvard MBA. And 3, show that you share Harvard's values and have the character it seeks. Now, Harvard has a page very clearly lays out the 3 things that it is looking for in applicants. The first one, and many of you got this earlier in the webinar, is looking for a habit of leadership. I personally think this is the most important of the 3, though I wouldn't discount any of them. Let me tell you a little story. I visited Harvard several years ago and met with a Harvard professor. In the course of our conversation, he asked me at one point, what do you see as the common thread among your clients that have been accepted to Harvard? I thought about it a minute and I said, leadership and impact. And he smiled and the conversation moved on. And before I left, I said, wait a second, I'd like to ask you, what do you see? He certainly had seen more Harvard students than I had in all his classes. What do you see as a common thread among your students? And he says, well, in my classroom, he says, I see incredible diversity. He said, but I smiled when you said impact and leadership because that's exactly what I would have said. So I don't think impact and leadership as the common thread in the Harvard Business School student body happens by accident. I think they're selecting for it. All right, let's move on to analytical aptitude and appetite. Now, we already discussed grades and test scores, and I said then that analytical aptitude and appetite is more than just the grades and test scores. It's a curiosity about the world. It's taking classes and being interested in things outside your professional sphere or your major. And this is particularly true, by the way, if you're thinking of 2+2. It involves showing a willingness to learn from and change after mistakes. It involves a willingness to look at successes and analyze and grow from them as well. Basically, it's about critical thinking and an ability to grow. And then the third criteria is engaged community citizenship. And there are several community service organizations on the screen. There are an infinite number of these organizations. And let's face it, most of you are fairly junior in your careers, and it can be hard for you to show leadership and impact in a junior role, especially if you are still in college and considering 2+2. But in community service, in co-curricular activities on a college campus, that's a great place to show impact, to assume responsibility, take on leadership roles. Now, ideally, you should be able to show leadership both on the professional and the non-professional spheres, but this don't ignore this opportunity. Now, let's also look into what is community service, and first of all, what is community? You can define your community as your geographic neighborhood, the place where you live, but it also can be much broader than that. It can be defined in terms of affinity, interests. So, for example, it can be sports, ethnicity, religious, political, geographic, alumni, or a professional association. Those all can be, you can be a member of multiple communities, obviously. Those all are communities that you could be a part of. And community service, well, service to me implies commitment and assumption of responsibility. And both those elements are critical in leadership. So if you assume responsibility, make a commitment to a community service organization, be it a fundraiser, a particular organizing event, taking responsibility for a little sister or a little brother and big sisters and big brothers, that is service, and you are usually, it's a community service, and you're also usually showing leadership. Not always, but usually. And finally, you don't have to join an existing organization. You can also start one. Start something that's new for your community and needed and necessary. Initiate. Again, I'm going to issue some warnings. Note the difference between mouthing platitudes and spitting back websites and showing you share the values. In other words, just talking about leadership, just talking about engaged community citizenship, that's not going to do it. You have to show them. The former is just waving a magic wand or putting lipstick on a pig, and it still isn't pretty. But examples in your essay, bullet points in your resume, answers in the job history boxes or in your interviews, your letters of recommendation, all these in total have to show habit of leadership, analytical aptitude and appetite, and of course, engaged community citizenship. So you don't have to spit back phrases at all, and you shouldn't. You have to show you will contribute to Harvard Business School and take advantage of Harvard Business School's 6 differentiators. You don't have to relate to all 6 of them. They're not going to be applicable to all 6 will not be applicable to all of you, but I would really hope that you could either through different elements of your application show an appreciation for 3 of them, 4 of them, something like that. Now, somebody mentioned earlier that he's really intrigued by the case method. That's great, but again, don't just say, oh, I love the case method. Why do you love the case method? What's it going to do for you? The case method at its core gives students practice as decision makers. That's the point of it. It puts you in the seat of the protagonist who has incomplete information and has to make a decision. So I'd strongly suggest that you, as you're shaping your application and you're thinking about what you want Harvard to know, you also think about what Harvard is looking for. Another warning, focus on rankings or brand can obscure this fit aspect of admissions as well as contribute to you focusing on the wrong things and end up talking in generalities and platitudes and all that other stuff. And the result will be that you blend in. You want to stand out in a positive way. You want to show you have distinctive experience and perspective to contribute at Harvard Business School. Harvard has lots of applicants, and it can be choosy. And that leads to my last specific point. The last element, actually, in the framework. Element 4, demonstrate that we'll be able to contribute to class discussions and field experiences, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. So much like you want to reveal a habit of leadership, you want to reveal a habit of contribution, impact through your resume, your essay, your activity history, interviews, and letters of recommendation. Because a fundamental of admissions is that past behavior predicts future behavior. So where have you made a difference? When have you contributed in the past? Can you give me some examples in the question window? Okay. Church leadership and culture. Can you go and give me a little bit more than that? What was the outcome? Training junior analyst class. Okay, what was the outcome? How many analysts did you train? You're describing responsibilities. I want to see results too. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? I won't bite. Grew local lean-in chapter from 43 members to 300 plus within 1 year. Excellent, Catherine. Increase in leaders within the church by 5 times. All right, now you're talking, Elizabeth. Turned around a charity that was being investigated by the CRA, equivalent of the IRS. Okay. I'm sure the details would start started the school's investment fund, and now an industry mentor of 50-plus students with $250,000 in equities. Very good, Andy. Trained 5 classmates for IELTS course. Okay. How I would want to know also how much their score increased. Did it change their lives? Are they now studying in English-speaking countries? Hosted one of the largest student-run blood donation camps in India at 1,000 units. We made a record. That's very good. Okay. I think you folks are getting the idea. I'm getting much more specific and concrete responses. Recruit and empower Hispanic girls in Virginia with a retention rate of 80%. All right. I'd like to know how many girls and what does empowering Hispanic girls in Virginia mean? Now, again, I realize that there's some limits to what we're doing here, but when you're describing what you're doing for Harvard, be concrete and also highlight achievements and results. Okay? Let's move on a little bit, but I think you're getting the idea. So we've talked a little bit about achievements, and that's certainly a big part of it. Some of you were talking about professional achievements. Some of you were talking about off-the-job achievements. That's great. Let's touch on work experience for a moment. Most students at Harvard Business School have 3 to 8 years of work experience. I think the real sweet spot is 4 to 5. I think at this point Harvard is more open to those with more work experience than less work experience. It's very hard to get in with 0 or actually you can't. With 1 year work experience, we do see some with 2, but mostly it's over 3. And this is, I think, a response to employer demand as well as your ability to contribute to class discussions. So that's the quantitative aspect of work experience. Qualitatively impressive work experience will show that you can contribute to your class at Harvard based on what you've done in the past. So again, it relates to habit of leadership, initiative, all those things, but also above average progression on the job. More responsibility than typical of somebody at your level of seniority. Faster progression, more responsibility, more leadership, etc. Now, I'd like to do a couple of polls now, and then I think they'll make the point better than my talking. So, here's the poll. How many of you worked in finance or consulting, traveled outside your home country, or volunteered in some capacity since college? Okay. Anybody else want to vote on this one? Okay, we're at 83%. Having voted, 85%. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We're actually at 88%. Good. Thank you for your participation. Here are the results. And it's 71% have worked in finance or consulting, 92% have traveled outside their home country, and 91% volunteered in some capacity. Yeah, you guys actually fit this a little better than the morning group. All right, let's take the next one, next poll. And again, you can choose more than one option in this poll too. How many of you during or since college have worked for a hedge fund focused on emerging markets, consulted for pharma companies, exploring entry to new markets, or served as a counselor for a wheelchair-bound, ventilator-dependent teen? Not that we're going to get quite as high a percentage participating, but let's give it a couple of minutes. Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm going to close the poll. I'm going to share the poll. All right, so the results are 6% worked for the hedge fund, 8% worked as a consultant for a pharma company exploring entry to new markets, and none of you have worked for a wheelchair-bound, ventilator-dependent teen. What's the difference between the two sets of questions in the question window, please? And specifics, Esme, you're right. Right, Diane, right. And what happens when we talk in terms of specifics? You're getting it, general versus specific, that's right. Differentiate. Paula, you got it. Not replicable, unique to you. That's right, Caitlin. You stand out. Shailene, exactly. You stand out. Right, Carla. Not many people can relate. I'm not sure it's a matter of relating. The second set differentiates you. Exactly, Joseph. Suddenly you become a group of one. You stand out. Poll 2 is about standing out. Exactly, Mohammed. Right. Making you stand out. Okay, you got it. The point here is that you end up standing out. And so the point I'm trying to make with this is part of standing out is having something that is impressive and outstanding. But part of it is how you present what you've done. So, are you an engineer or a transportation engineer? Are you a consultant or a healthcare consultant? Did you volunteer or did you found a new organization to address a specific need in your community? However you define your community. So again, part of standing out and showing that you have something distinctive to contribute to the Harvard Business School class is having something specific and outstanding to relate. But the other part of it is how you present it. Present it with specifics, present it with concreteness, and it'll be more credible, more specific, more memorable. Why is distinctive contribution so important? Well, let's listen in this case to Derek Bolton, who wrote an article several years ago. He's the former assistant dean and director of MBA admissions at Stanford, and he wrote this for the GMAC, a GMAC article. He defined admissions as a two-step process. The first one is evaluation, determining the qualified, and at schools like Harvard and Stanford, there are always too many. The second part was selection, crafting a class determining which candidates to admit among those evaluated as highly qualified. This is why specificity, concreteness, and yes, outstanding achievements are so important. Because the school has no reason to admit you if you sound like everybody else. And if you're just like everybody else, then they're just going to look at the numbers and go for the highest number. But what they really want is to see how you're going to be a distinctive stone in the class mosaic that they're creating, a distinctive color, you. And this is also why there's no 100% formula or recipe for acceptance, because at the end of the day, they're not just admissions officers, they're enrollment managers, and they are creating a class and community. But the implication from the selection part of this process is that they have no reason to admit an applicant who lacks something distinctive to contribute. Now let's review the 4 strategic parts of the framework. Demonstrate you can do the work in Excel. Reveal a goal that requires an HBS MBA. Show you share the values and have the qualities that Harvard seeks. And reveal an ability to contribute a distinctive element to your class and the Harvard community. Now let's take a look at the distinctive elements of the Harvard Business School application. First, let's take a look at the job and activity history. They are here as throughout. You're probably getting bored of me telling you this, looking for evidence of leadership and achievement, leadership and impact. The employment section asks for the 3 most recent jobs, and each box asks for 250 characters. It's approximately 50 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 250 words per job. That's 750 words in job descriptions. There's also the activity history, activity descriptions. I'll list up to 3 extracurricular activities. So, which I think you don't have quite as much space, but you still have some. So you don't treat these as an afterthought. These are really important, and they should complement your essay, and your essay should complement these boxes and your resume. Even where Harvard Business School asks for roles and responsibilities, for example, the first box, use those 250 characters to provide specifics that distinguish and amplify your role. So, are you going to write led team, or are you going to write led cross-functional team of 5, was youngest member? Do you hear the difference? Raise your hand if you hear the difference. Okay. In terms of the activities, and quantify impact whenever possible. In terms of the activities, Harvard wants to read about your most important extracurricular activities. Please tell us about the things you do while not at work or in class. Include other activities like community service here as well. We use this section to get a sense of the leadership roles and activities that attract you. Now, this is in order of importance to you, and as always, Harvard Business School is looking for leadership, but they really are just trying to get to know you here. Okay, and then the essay. There is one question for the class of 2020, which is the same as it was for the class of 2019. As we review your application, what more would you like us to know as we consider your candidacy for the Harvard Business School MBA program? There is no word limit for this question, but don't write the great American novel. That's me talking, not them. I think the key question for you as you think about this essay and think about what you're going to put into the job description and the other boxes in the application is, given what they're going to know, what else do you want them to know about you? What do you want them to know that isn't reflected elsewhere? What are you truly proud of? Think of the 3 Harvard criteria. And then as you write that essay, it could be context for events listed in the resume or activity list. It could be a challenge you faced in achieving what you've achieved, and it could be over time. It could be a pivotal moment for you. The path you were on before, the path after that moment, and how it's influenced you. It should be something that only you can write, and it should be something that you would want to share with the Harvard Business School Admissions Committee. Now I'd like you to, for yourself, you don't have to put it in the question window, perhaps on the worksheet if you printed it out, if not, on just a piece of paper. Write down just some ideas. Just jot down some ideas now, what you would like Harvard Business School to know about you that isn't going to be in the boxes or the resume or the transcript. This is for you, so write down some ideas for yourself. I really want you to leave this webinar having moved forward on your Harvard Business School application at least a little bit. I would not spend the whole essay discussing why your undergrad GPA was so low, Andy. We're going to get to that in a minute. You could write about a personal experience or story that impacted you. Yes, definitely. Yes, absolutely. Okay, what the Harvard Business School essay should not be. It shouldn't be a cut and paste of your response to Stanford to what matters to you most and why. It shouldn't be Columbia Business School, either of your response to either of Columbia Business School's 3rd question. It also shouldn't be the kitchen sink. You should not take a kitchen sink approach and stuff into this everything you want them to know. Choose the most critical and impressive so that you have a coherent essay, an impressive essay, and something that also shows good judgment. Although there is no word limit, be concise. Harvard and most busy people value concision. Don't write more than necessary. All right, for those of you concerned about a low GPA, Harvard does allow for additional information, and the instructions there are, please only add additional information here if you need to clarify any information provided in the other sections of your application. For instance, a low GPA. This is not meant to be used as additional essay. Please limit your additional information to the space in this section. There's a 500 character limit, which is roughly 100 words. So use the additional information section to provide context or to explain. I prefer to think of it as providing context, because explanations sometimes veer into the whining or excuse category, and that's not what you want. You need to provide context for perhaps a dip in grades, perhaps an explanation for a choice of recommender, an unusual choice of recommender, that kind of thing, a gap in employment. You might want to, that's what that would be for. The interview. Prepare for a probing interview with someone who has closely reviewed your application. They may ask you to connect the dots, explain decision and pivot points in your life, and respond thoughtfully to an unexpected question. Just something off the top of, a little bit out of left field. What is the purpose of the Harvard Business School interview? It's to evaluate your fitness for learning in the case-based method. So it's a matter of showing poise, an ability to think on your feet, good articulation, and to assess your fit with the Harvard Business School community. Now, an accent, by the way, will not keep you out, as long as you can provide a substantive answers to questions. Prepare to tie your past to Harvard Business School and your future. Ultimately, you want them to believe that you really belong in their community, that you're a member of their community, but you just haven't yet started paying tuition. Prepare examples and anecdotes that show you in a community or group setting as a giver, not a taker, as a person who has made a difference, and of course, leadership and impact. The interview reflection is something you're going to need to do after you interview if you're lucky enough to be invited. So after your interview, what I would suggest is take a few minutes to decompress, relax, go off to a quiet corner, perhaps at Harvard, perhaps at your hotel, and then think about the interview. Where did you think you answered well? What did you wish you had been asked? Where do you think maybe you didn't answer so well and you want to clarify some points? It's for all those things that Harvard provides you the interview reflections. It's their attempt to give you the last word on your application. Now, I go into a little bit more detail at the URL on the screen, and again, we will be sending out these URLs after the webinar. It's for those things you wish you had said or wish they had asked. And also, it's an email. It's not an essay, it's an email. It's an opportunity for you to demonstrate how you communicate, clearly and effectively, by the way, when you don't have the time to spend weeks crafting a response. Now let's go back to your goal in submitting an application to Harvard, and that's to show you belong at Harvard. So the first three to answer the next question the first three people here gets a copy of MBA Missions for Smarties. That's the book that I co-authored with Judy Gruen. If you're outside the U.S., it's Kindle only. Inside the U.S., and I know most people present are in the United States right now, you can choose between paperback or Kindle versions. The question is, list one of Harvard Business School's 3 criteria for admission in the question window. Okay, Esme, you got it. Analytical aptitude and appetite. Habit of leadership, Elizabeth, you got that. And habit of leadership, Diane. Boy, the women are doing really well today. Okay, Rachel, do you see that? Okay, Esme, Elizabeth, and Diane got it. Now there's one community, okay, the third one was engage community citizenship. Somehow that did not come through quite as clearly here, but most of you got the other two. Okay. Let's review the 4 parts of the framework that need to be part of your applications to show you belong at Harvard. 1, evidence you can do the work. Realistic goal requiring an MBA from Harvard Business School. 3, that show that you meet Harvard's criteria and share its values. And 4, demonstrate that you'll be able to contribute distinctively to class discussions and teamwork, the school's community, and ultimately make the school proud. Those are the things, those are the parts of the framework. That's what you need to do to have a strong application with an enhanced chance of acceptance. Let's put it that way. And now for my last caveat, last warning. The admissions committee readers, and I've met them, are sharp, intelligent professionals. Don't try to craft, fake, or fool. The best presentation of you is an authentic reflection of your achievements and dreams, keeping in mind the 4-part framework that will make Harvard want you. Now realize that a successful Harvard application requires all 4 elements of this 4-part framework. That's the one thing I really want you to take away from tonight's webinar. Not just 1, not 3 out of 4, because to get accepted to Harvard Business School, you need to show that you both belong at Harvard, and that's really parts 1 through 3, and stand out in the applicant pool, part 4. This framework gives you the what of a successful application, what you need to do. Now you need the how, and that's where we at Accepted can help you. We want to guide you in showing that you both belong at Harvard, or whatever MBA program you are aiming for, and stand out in the applicant pool. We want to guide you in creating an application that as a whole spotlights your strengths and mitigates your weaknesses. An application that accomplishes everything we've discussed here today. Here's what you get accepted. customized approach that fits your needs. We're definitely not one size fits all. We fit our advising to our clients' needs. Options, so that if you only need a little help with one element of the application, that's what you get. If you're starting from scratch and want comprehensive assistance, that's what you get. And you can purchase our most common services either on a flat fee package basis or on an hourly fee basis. And you will work with one dedicated advisor who becomes expert in your story, in addition to being an MBA admissions expert, and helping you present it. We've been helping clients get accepted to Harvard Business School and other top MBA programs for over 20 years. We have collectively decades of experience in MBA admissions, and our staff consists of highly experienced consultants with 5, 10, 15, and even 20 years of experience. Former admissions committee members and directors and published authors are on PhDs are on our staff. Candor and objectivity combined with decades of experience in MBA admissions, that's what you get at Accepted. Now, some may say Accepted is expensive, and we're definitely not a cheap service because of the quality of our staff. However, there are also expensive risks associated with not using Accepted. Reapplication can cost a few $1,000s. One additional year of pre-MBA earnings can cost in the 5 figures. One additional year of a job you dislike if you're in a job you dislike. And then there's a potential that you could have gotten into a better program with lifelong higher earnings and network. That could cost 5 or 6 figures. Every year, we work with applicants who talked to us a year earlier and decided, after taking the do-it-yourself approach and getting rejected, to work with us. They would have been better off working with us initially, and so would you. But enough from me. What do Accepted's clients say? Well, here's a couple of examples. I did find out just over a week ago that I was admitted to HBS. Super exciting news. I definitely would not have been as successful without your, in this case, Esmeralda Cardinal's help. Or this feedback from a different client from a highly overrepresented group in the applicant pool who worked on I think it was his Harvard app with Jennifer Bloom. And yesterday I got the good news, and it was from Harvard. I am absolutely thrilled. Amidst the euphoria, I want to take a moment to thank Accepted, Jennifer in particular, for all the help and in ways that went beyond admissions consulting. Or this one. It's a wonderful feeling to have been accepted by Harvard, a school that until now I had only dreamed of attending, but sincerely I could not have done it without the help of Cindy. She made sense of all my confused ideas and inspired me to write well, but the best part was her editing. It was almost magical. Different people, different challenges, and different fears. Not now, but at the time that they wrote these emails, celebrating acceptance at Harvard Business School, and the same result. I can't say that all our clients are accepted to Harvard, but we'd sure like to use the same magic of expert, insightful individual advising and editing that we use with these clients to help you get accepted to Harvard Business School. So at this point, we're going to get to the Q&A in just a second. It's now July. There's time before Harvard's round 1 deadline to work with us. Contact us ASAP, and we'd be happy to help you from scratch or review and edit your essays or guide you in the interview if you're invited to interview. Our goal is to guide you so that you present all 4 of the critical parts of this framework and show that you both belong at Harvard and are a standout in the applicant pool. Take these steps, the ones you see on your screen, to work with an accepted MBA admissions consultant. Plus, this is the announcement I promised you earlier. We currently have 10% off special on Accepted. It ends tomorrow at midnight Pacific. So you can save 10%. It can save you several $100s depending upon what you purchase. Use coupon code SUMMER, and again it ends July 7th at 11:59 p.m. Pacific time. Coupon code SUMMER, S-U-M-M-E-R. Now for your questions. All right, let me just get myself situated so I can see the questions well. Okay, let's see. How would someone in banking answer that question if my goal is to stay in banking? I assume you're referring to the aspirational one. So what are your aspirations? Well, if you want to stay in banking, that's fine. But I would talk then about the impact you hope to have on some of the things you want to change in banking. What leadership role do you aspire to in banking? Again, I would talk about the impact that you hope to have in the future. But thank you, Akash, for the excellent question. Let's see what else we have here. Okay. Aleem asks, why is accepted versus MBA exchange versus MBA mission? Basically, why are you guys over the competition? Well, I'm not an expert in MBA exchange or MBA mission, and I'm certainly not going to badmouth them here. Accepted has been around. We're one of the oldest admissions consultancies on the web. We've been around since 1994. We also have, I think, put more of ourselves in terms of our expertise out in the public domain than the other two entities, so I can't be sure of that. We have former admissions directors on staff. We have published authors. And I think what I would suggest you do if you're not sure is talk to each of us and decide which one serves you best. Okay? But thank you for the question. Oh, here's an interesting question. What are the most common pitfalls private equity finance candidates make? That's an interesting one, Kevin. I would say the most common one is overconfidence, a certain cockiness, because you know you have really good experience, and you do. Another common pitfall is it's hard for you to show that engaged community citizenship that Harvard values. So you have to make time for it, or you have to think about it in some of the broader ways that I mentioned. So professional community counts, alumni association counts. But those would, I think, be probably the two most common pitfalls of coming from private equity and finance. And a third one is just a lack of well-roundedness, which kind of goes with the community service one. But thank you for the question. All right, let's see. All right. Is there an advantage to applying in the first round? There's an advantage to applying in the first round, in my opinion, if your application will be equally good in both rounds. So don't rush your application or submit something that's sloppy in order to submit in the first round. The reason I prefer the first round is the class is empty. And no seats have been given up. And I think that especially if you're coming from a common cohort in the applicant pool, there are advantages to applying round one. But I also, again, would not rush your application or submit something that's sloppy in order to get it in round one. Thanks for the good question. All right, let's see what else we have here. Elizabeth asks, can you speak to the role of community service for an applicant already coming from the nonprofit sector? How can we show additional service beyond the professional day-to-day? Well, I think you don't have to worry about it because your profession is intrinsically serving a community. Now, as I mentioned earlier, community can be defined in multiple ways, and if you're going to show a habit of leadership, then you can engage and probably do engage with multiple communities, right? Some people have sports interests and perhaps religious affiliations and maybe an ethnic affiliation. Those are all three different communities, and of course they live in a particular neighborhood. So the fact that you work for a not-for-profit already is showing engaged community citizenship, but you probably can also show it in other ways, and in that way also show a habit of leadership. Did that answer your question? Caitlin writes, thanks for the great webinar. My question is that if you are looking for an industry job function change after the MBA, do you have any advice on how to outline your short-term and long-term goals? Career change is fine. You don't feel disadvantaged because you're planning to change careers. So what I would do is in the box where they asked about your short-term goals, your immediate post-MBA goals, what are your immediate post-MBA goals? Just list them. And there should be, maybe in your essay, you can explain the pivot that you're making. You should be prepared to explain it in the interview, that's for sure. And in terms of longer goals, they should be able to see, I mean, if it makes sense that your short-term goal will lead to a long-term goal, it should, again, a brief word or two of explanation may be all that you need. Again, without knowing the details, I'm at a little bit of a disadvantage, but I do appreciate the feedback. You're most welcome. Hope that helped. Let's see, what else do we have here? Cynthia writes, I plan to apply in 2 years. I really want to prepare myself well. Do you have a payment plan over the years? I'm from Brazil, and I earn in reals. Everything is almost 4 times. I think that's a question that's best taken offline in terms of your particular situation. You can, our minimum is $305 for an hour consultation, and that may be all you need at this point to get you going and give you direction to prepare yourself to apply in 2 years. It could be some money very, very well spent. We also have, and so that you don't have to take out, buy a large package now. You can buy an hour of consulting and really get some very valuable input. Okay. In terms of payment plans, we do have something that's called PayPal credit, but I believe you have to have a U.S. Social Security number and address for it, so that might not work if you're in Brazil. Oh yeah, you want to post that? Okay. And also, Rachel right now is going to post, my assistant, a link to a guide that we have for people who are, and this is free, several years away from applying. And then there is the book that I wrote that's available on Amazon. You're welcome to go for that. That'll also give you some suggestions, and that's very inexpensive. Okay, let's see. This thing just moved. Hold on a second. Okay. Okay. Diane says, I applied to HBS last year. I'm applying as a reapplicant. Does HBS have a bias with reapplicants? To my knowledge, no. I haven't seen any bias. We've seen reapplicants get accepted. We've seen reapplicants be rejected. And I don't have any indication whatsoever that there's any bias either way. In general, MBA programs like reapplicants, but I don't have any reliable or valid statistics on that. What I would advise you to do, if you are a reapplicant, and this is true for all reapplicants, you need to show growth and change. You need to look at your application and assess what went wrong. It could be nothing went wrong, but there are basically 4 reasons for rejection. One is you simply weren't qualified. You didn't have the academics. You didn't show fit. You didn't have the goal. You didn't, again, you weren't qualified. 2, second reason is you were and are qualified, but you didn't present those qualifications effectively. And 3, you were a victim of the numbers. You could have done a good job on both 1 and 2 and still get rejected at Harvard. That's reality. And 4 is a combination of any of those. Now, I would not jump to number 3 automatically because that kind of lets you off the hook. And even if you are convinced that number 3, you are a victim of the numbers, is a reason for rejection, realize that you must show growth. Harvard does not want to admit static individuals. They want to admit dynamic, growing individuals. So that's a little bit of advice for anybody here who's a reapplicant. Thanks for the question. Okay, Eva asks, how many schools do you recommend applying to? I'm targeting top-ranked schools and am currently deciding between 5 programs. Do you have a recommendation for how many schools to apply to? That depends a lot on your qualifications. If you're a highly competitive candidate, since you are applying probably to the schools with lowest acceptance rates, I would probably recommend 4 to 6. If you are not confident of your competitiveness at your target schools, I'd probably bring it up to 6 to 8, and I'd split it between round 1 and round 2. That's what I would recommend. If you're highly, highly competitive or geographically limited, then maybe 3 or 4, but I'm really more comfortable with 4 to 6 if you're applying to the top-ranked programs. Joseph writes, I appreciate the tips. You're welcome. I've heard the essay is not a place to show career goals since they are in the short answers. What do you advise? I agree with that advice, unless it relates to the story that you're somehow telling. They're asking about career goals in that post-MBA intended information section. I don't believe that Harvard puts a lot of emphasis on career goals other than to see that you have the kind of goals that they can support and the kind of goals that their graduates tend to gravitate for. Beyond that, I would not focus on that in the essay. And let's see. Aleem asks, as part of your services, do you give us realistic probabilities of entrance to the program we want to go to? We don't give you, and how do you give us those kinds of numbers? I don't give it to you in terms of numbers, Aleem. I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name too badly. Because I can give you a sense of whether you're competitive. I can give you a sense of whether the program is a stretch or whether it's, in my opinion, pays for you to apply or doesn't pay. I can't give you, with any degree of certainty, a percentage of acceptance. And at the end of the day, realize that whether you have a 5%, a 10%, or a 70% chance of acceptance, you're going to be in or out, and that's 100%. So, again, I prefer to give more qualitative assessments than statistical numbers that I would pull out of the air. But thank you for the question. And let's see. Okay, I want to end with a final thought and story, but first I want to thank you all for coming, sharing your questions, your time, your attention. I know you're all busy, and I appreciate you joining me this evening. The thought, I've already talked about how important all 4 elements are of the framework, but there's also a paradox inherent to acceptance at top business schools. You have to demonstrate that you fit in and that you stand out. By fitting in, I mean that you belong at the target school, in this case Harvard Business School, in terms of your goals, academics, work experience, and values, that you're going to be a valuable member of Harvard's community. And for Harvard, that means showing that you have the habit of leadership, analytical aptitude, and appetite, and engaged community citizenship that Harvard is looking for. But at the same time, you have to show that you stand out. You have to stand out in a highly qualified, intensely competitive, outstandingly talented applicant pool. And you have to show that you're going to contribute distinctively, add a special something to the school's community, and make the admissions committee members proud they voted to admit you as an individual. Let me give you an example of how one of our outstanding consultants works with a client to successfully navigate that paradox at the heart of the admissions process. I've been talking about how important distinguishing yourself is. Executive consultant Natalie Greenblatt Epstein puts it front and center when working with her clients to Harvard Business School. She tries to unearth what she likes to call the gem or the secret sauce in her client's profile. So, for example, with Sally, and that's a pseudonym, that gem or secret sauce was an unusual hobby that complements her impressive but more typical work experience. It also shows, that hobby also shows initiative, critical thinking, a sense of adventure, and leadership. Sally's results, in her words, and now I'm quoting an email that I got from Sally, I have great news. I got accepted by 4 out of 5 schools, and one school even made a great scholarship offer. Most likely, I will move to Boston, HBS in August. I couldn't be happier. With Accepted's help, Sally found her secret sauce, unearthed the gem inside of her. She followed the steps on the screen, your screen now, and went to Harvard Business School. We'd love to help you discover, present, and polish the gem that's inside of you so that you can also have the option of attending Harvard Business School.